about the images of Blacks LGBTQ in media. From Moonlight to Posse and in between, the enormous impact of the LGBT community of color has never been more center stage. Removed from the shadows, there's no denying or downplaying the LGBTQ community of color's contributions to contemporary pop culture. With COVID-19 as the driving theme of, well, that wasn't right. Anyway, instead of reading this, I'm just going to tell you what this is all about. The purpose of tonight is for the members, the leaders of these three esteemed groups to come together and to examine images of LGBTQ people in media. And so without further ado, I am going to pass you off to our host tonight, Ray Cornelius, representing the African American film critics.
Hello, everyone. And Gil, thank you so very much. I'm so happy to be here tonight and really excited to have this amazing conversation. Again, thank you, AAFCA, for the opportunity. And guys, let's have some fun tonight. It's all about pride, right? So we're going to be talking to, as Gil said, some amazing, amazing organizations and leaders of those organizations. We're going to start off with Mr. Charles Stevens, founder and executive director of the Counter Narrative Project, where storytelling is critical to social change. He's also being joined by Michael Ward. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hey, I'm well. How are you?
There we go. We got some.
How are you?
Good. I'm doing wonderful. Next, we have Mr. V. Scott Hamilton, Chief Operating Officer for Better Brothers Los Angeles. And they're also the creators of the Truth Awards. Hey there, V. Scott Hamilton. How are you?
Hey, Ray. I'm good. How are you?
Good. And we also have Mr. Emil Wilbekin, former editor-at-large of Essence Magazine, as well as Vibe Magazine, and founder of Native Son. And I just got to say, a man about town. Love your Instagram. Been loving it for a very long time. I'm so jealous.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with everyone.
We also have Mr. Patrick Riley. Patrick Riley is a media personality, book author, producer. Patrick is also another person whose Instagram I'm jealous of as well. And we're so happy to have you here, Patrick. How are you?
Hello, Ray. Hello, gentlemen. Good to see you all. Happy Pride.
Yeah. And another person that we're also going to have is Mr. Ed Adams, who's also representing AAFCA, an amazing film critic and someone that I've had on my show, Upfront, inside Atlanta's entertainment industry, every time we can talk about African-American films and images. So guys, let's get to it. We've got an hour here, and I know that folks are really excited to talk about, or to hear us talk about, African-American gay images in television and film. And so I wanted to, when I was kind of creating this, I wanted to incorporate some quotes. I wanted to incorporate some movie lines. I wanted to have a little bit of fun with this, and want to start off with this quote. "Love does not begin and end the way we seem to think it does. Love is a battle. Love is a war. Love is growing up." And that comes from none other than Mr. James Baldwin. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. And so I want to go back to the beginning. He mentions growing up. I want to go back to the very, very beginning. And I want you to recall your very first time. Not that first time, but the first time that you saw African-American gay images in television, film, or in literature. And I want to start with you, Emil. What was the very first image that you saw, and how did that image affect you growing up?
Well, the first image that I recall, and while he wasn't necessarily out, was Gene Anthony Ray on Fame. And just growing up, I remember just like feeling connected to him in some way, and his energy and his kind of like audacity, right? Like he was bold, he was really fierce, he was like the best dancer, he was sassy, he was very masculine too, and there's just something about him that I really connected to, and that was probably my earliest moments of being like, okay, I think I like men. And sadly, I can't dance well, but that was probably my first kind of aha moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And V. Scott Hamilton, what about you? Your very first image?
Oh, wow. It's crazy that Emil said Gene Anthony Ray, because that kind of was mine. As a young boy, I always wanted to be a dancer until my dad told me that he wasn't coming to see his son in a leotard. but that was like my first image. I didn't know, I just knew Leroy, I wanted to be able to leap across the screen like he did. But that was like my first image. But I would say probably Black gay men probably had to be Noah's Ark when when I really think about it, like after coming into my own would be Noah's Ark.
Black Men Loving Black Men is the revolutionary act that comes from Marlon Riggs, filmmaker, documentarian of Tongues Untied. That is a, that film, groundbreaking film, came out in 1989, and it explored Black men loving Black men, masculinity, race, homophobia, relationships, the church, and body imagery. I want to go to you, Charles. I wanted to ask you, how did that film change the narrative for Black gay men in this country?
Absolutely. Marlon Riggs was such a visionary, and he, through Tongues Untied, was able to depict the experiences, the vulnerability, the inner lives of Black gay men in a way that had never been done before. He also used his platform to showcase the voices of poets like Essex Hemphill and Joseph Beam, the writer. So throughout the film, you hear their words being performed. But ultimately, I think Marlon Riggs succeeded in creating a film that pushed the boundaries of genre. Is it a documentary? Is it an experimental film? So I think aesthetically, he was masterful. But the biggest, I think, legacy of Tongues Untied is that it inspired generation after generation of Black gay activists and artists and organizers and scholars. And to this day, I think the words that we hear in the film still resonate.
And for Patrick, what about you? How did this film change your perception about Black gay men when you saw it?
Well, I think it set a tone for me. I want an Anthony Ray question. Primarily because my family also too told me to stop flouncing all around this house like a sissy with those high kicks. You will not dance. And it just really, he was definitely an image for me. But this film did just those things. It really the iconography of human relation on the screen in a way that we had never seen it. Because when I think of earlier images of Black gay men, they were Black gay men that I wasn't sure was gay, but I think of Stanley Bennett Clay. Do you guys know Stanley Clay, NAACP Image Award winning writer? But he was Jimmy Pearson in an early episode of Good Times. And he wasn't playing gay, but there was that part of me early on that felt an identification with actors who had to play straight but were gay. And I could gaydar them every time. And I just sort of want to speak the name of Stanley Bennett Clay and those many other actors in the 70s who really had no space or safe place to be who they were, but their great Sidney Poitier 2.0 leading man images. There's Paul Winfield that we should speak his name. Leroy Brown, I'm forgetting his name, Diane Carroll's best friend. But it's just, I just think it's just interesting that there's that window of time just before this film you speak of, that we really were in a scenario where we were not, and it would be Gene Anthony Ray that would be the transition that gets us to the late 80s. So I just wanted to kind of paint that context.
Absolutely. The 1980s, we also saw glimpses of Black love between women, and we saw a glimpse of that in the beloved Oprah Winfrey miniseries, The Women of Brewster Place, as well as Alice Walker's classic, The Color Purple. So Emil, take us back to that time and how those films helped to kind of shape what love looked like between two women.
Well, I think that time period, we were experiencing new Black literature. There were strong Black women voices, and to see these relationships of two women together, I think it's not uncommon in the Black community to see intersectional relationships, but to see it brought to life through this literature and through these films, it was beautiful. You know, it is affirming. And I think a lot of times we think about our blended families and how we're raised and things like that. And it's not uncommon. Like, we know trans people growing up. We knew the aunties who were lesbians. We knew the butch gay uncle. That people didn't really talk about it, but it's part of our shared experience. And so I think seeing it on film, it was beautiful and affirming as a queer person, but it was beautiful.
Absolutely. I want to switch it up a little bit and give you this quote. Shade comes from reading, and reading comes from shade. That was taken from the iconic 1990 documentary film Paris is Burning. And we were introduced to some amazing characters from that film. Pepper LaBeija, Willie Ninja, Octavia St. Laurent, and of course, Dorian Corey and that dead body in the trunk are just a few of those characters. It was also the first time that America was sort of introduced to the world of underground ballroom dancing, voguing, gay houses, what that whole thing was about. And then we also learned a little gay lingo, like you had said, butch queens, shade, and read. So I'm going to switch this over to you, Michael Ward. What were your thoughts when you first saw that film, and how did that sort of shape your mind when you saw those images on the screen?
Well, with Paris is Burning, for me, I think it was like looking into a world that I've never seen or witnessed before. I think especially coming into the language piece, like you said, shade comes from reading. All of those things for me, of getting to uncover all of these extra layers about myself and things that I never knew. And coming into Paris is Burning, I came into it later, I would say, of coming into my fullness. So even getting to see the voguing, the use of a chosen family versus your birth family, of getting to decide who stays in your life and who doesn't stay in your life. And as well, just seeing myself within these characters, and getting a glimpse of New York at that time was just absolutely amazing for me. And I think, as far as learning is with the ballroom community, of coming into it with research that was done with Frank Leon Roberts and other members of the house community, of seeing how it's all interconnected with one another, whether we identify as gay, whether we identify as transgender, and learning a little bit of my history and more of it, of the sacrifices and everything that came through. I think Paris is Burning definitely was instrumental in my development and my owning of myself, of who I am, and just my decision to choose the family that I wanted to choose when I came out to my parents and I wasn't accepted. I'll just say that. So it's definitely been instrumental into discovering the fullness of myself.
You know, that film also sort of set a template for shows like Pose, as well as the new competition series, Legendary. I'm going to go to you, V. Scott Hamilton. What are your thoughts about I don't want to call it the commercialization, but almost as if this the culture is now being disseminated to America, in a sense, in a way that I think little Jenny in Idaho may want to see or learn what a house is, or, you know, folks on the other side of the country may want to know what's happening in New York City in these underground houses. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's important. I think it's a moment where hopefully, I want to say parents are actually, and families are learning that here is this community that has taken care of their child when they've kind of disowned them. And this is how they've been protected by house mothers or house fathers and some of their creativity. I mean, as a culture, we are creative people. And so you get to see that through dance, through voguing, through the costumes. But I think you also see resiliency, like how we fight for what's right for ourselves. I think about like Candy, how, you know, she's very slick at the tongue, but, you know, she was fierce. And many times our slickness of our tongue or being shady or reading is a part of protection. That's our God. So I think that's important. I think, you know, hopefully, I hope Black families are looking, or any families that have LGBTQ plus individuals in them, see like that struggle and see how disowning us, how we have to go and build another family. So I think it's important.
The 1990s also saw a, not really a birth, but we saw a good number of Black gay erotica and romance in literature with books by Elin Harris and James Earl Hardy. I want to go back to you, Charles, and talk about the importance of having those types of books to read. I know when I was in college, those were books that were like, dude, you got that book, you got that book. So let's talk about the importance of Black gay literature.
Absolutely. I think that for many of us, especially those of us that came of age before the internet, how we came about self-discovery was through literature. For some of us, the first Black gay communities we were a part of were through books. I absolutely remember being 14, 15 years old and taking my mom's copy of Invisible Life and Just Above My, Just As I Am, and reading them and feeling like I'm reading something dangerous and forbidden, but it was exciting and it was revealing. And and then meeting other gay boys in high school and carrying the Elin hair. It's like that's kind of how we knew each other, and just building community around that. And yeah, so I think for many of us, just the experience of having those books were just really important in our development.
Absolutely. We're all born naked and the rest is drag. That comes from drag superstar, as I like to call him, RuPaul, as he sashayed his way into our hearts with his hit song, Supermodel of the World in 1993. 3 years later, he sashayed into America's homes with his very first VH1 series, The RuPaul Show. And who would have thought about that RuPaul would have a show back then? Let's talk about his influence in music and in television. And Patrick, I see you shaking your head there. What was it like when you saw RuPaul host that show? Of course, with one of our favorite divas, Diana Ross. He also had Cher on that show, and Millie Jackson. And again, this was unheard of. We had never seen a show like this before. So what were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, you speak very pointedly of that time. I mean, the fact that a drag queen could host a really traditional talk show with A-list guests. I mean, only the best divas were coming by to see Ru, was proof that he had really changed people's minds and changed people's hearts, much like V. Scott speaks through the art. And so I think, just the way that Vogue, we all know, didn't start with Madonna and it started on the ballroom floors in the Bronx. It's the same thing where RuPaul used the art that is true to us and true to what people were beginning to experience in drag culture. And he was able to adapt that to a talk show. And it was a very entertaining talk show. And she held her own through it all. Many, many years before she'd get the opportunity to do it again and do it again kind of on another level, on a next level, as proof that the industry was willing to take a chance on us, but it didn't really ripple into the dragapalooza that's going on now in TV. It's many years later.
Absolutely. And Emil, I wanted you to chime in also too about how at that time in the 90s, we were starting to see, since you were at Vibe magazine and Essence magazine, we were now starting to see a lot more gay images in magazines, or what appeared to be as gay friendly ads, advertisements, things of that nature. So if you can speak to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was so privileged to be the editor-in-chief of Vibe and the golden era of hip hop, and to be an out, Black gay man. It felt very important with the culture that Vibe was covering, hip hop and urban, that if we weren't going to talk about LGBTQ plus people, then it wouldn't be authentic to the culture. I mean, if you looked at the drag that a lot of the rappers were doing at that time, that was all taken from us at the clubs and on the street corners and how we rolled. And so it was also very homoerotic, and it was the whole time of the DL culture and looking for the Black gay rapper and all these things. So for me, it was very important to be authentic to the culture and to cover Black, gay, lesbian, trans stories. What was even more important was the intentionality, which was actually from Phil Wilson from the Black AIDS Institute, of how are we crafting stories around HIV and AIDS and incorporating that into our content. So I felt like it was very important with the HIV numbers in the Black gay community being so high that we needed to talk about DL culture. We needed to talk about things like that. We also did stories around Black lesbians and their relationships, because it was very, again, molded after this whole hip hop swag and persona. So it was just important to me from a cultural perspective.
Absolutely. We're a very diverse community. There are a lot of stories within the Black gay world that deserve to be told, and very few have been told. That comes from Patrick Ian Polk, filmmaker, and whose 2000 indie film Punks gave us a fresh new perspective of LGBTQ images in just one film. Let's go over some of those amazing characters. You had the drag diva Miss Crystal, as well as the shy and meek Marcus. You had the in and out of love Mr. Hill, and the roundaway Dante. Let's talk about Patrick Ian Polk's groundbreaking, he just really just kind of came out there with this film, which led to Noah's Ark, which I believe was the first Black gay series on television, and it was on Logo, which was the new gay network at that time. So I'm going to switch it up and go to Scott and talk about that, if you will, Patrick's impact on pushing gay images forward.
So what I can remember about that time, I was living in Atlanta, which was transitioning to being like hot Atlanta, and a place, where young Black gay men were moving, and I guess it was coming of age time. It's right after the Olympics. And I just remember finally saying, wow, there's myself on screen, or me and my friends, or there were characters that I could relate to. Because many of the times we didn't have a chance to see ourselves. So this was me coming out of college and having read, Elan Harris, Invisible Life, and James R. Hardy and his books. And now, now seeing Noah's Ark and actually being able to see characters that I could relate with on screen. I just thought it was important. And it was groundbreaking. I mean, it was something, every Sunday, I think he used to come on, get in front of the screen and watch. Because I think also at the same time, there was Queer as Folks on Showtime, which was showing a different set of images. So it was like finally, a good time that we, or myself, I could be seen, I could relate, and I could call my friends and be like, did you see what happened? Or do you remember a time that, this happened to us? So it was groundbreaking, it was important. And I think it just started a movement at that time that, brought other shows and other, some films and stuff, and actually maybe started the discussion that we're having today.
And so that series, Noah's Ark, was on Logo, but it was only on for one season. I want to go to you, Patrick, and ask, why do you think it only lasted a season? Because like you just referenced, Scott, you had Queer as Folk, you had Will and Grace, which was hugely popular at that time. So America was changing, thoughts were changing about seeing gay people on television. Why do you think that Noah's Ark did not last?
I don't think we have to look any further than Minneapolis to know how devalued the Black audience is treated and has been treated traditionally in white worlds. In that Logo world, they did give us a chance. We showed up and showed out. I chaired the NABJ Arts and Entertainment Task Force at the time. We flew Patrick and Jensen in and did cross-programming to bring awareness of this amazing show to the conventioneers and registrants at large, many of whom became fans and sort of crossed out of their comfort zones to enjoy a show that was really making it happen. But for whatever reason, Logo has never always, up until its embrace of RuPaul in drag race form, Logo hasn't really embraced the Black narrative in a way that would allow it to have legs and a shelf life. We just haven't seen that. And Noah's Ark, I think, was a casualty of that behavior. We did fortunately get a movie, Jumping the Broom, out of it. So it did have some extended life, but it goes down having a true following to this day off of that one season, which ended with Top of the World Dana Ross, if you recall.
I want to go back to you, Charles, and also this is a question for you, Emil. The difference between gay and Black and gay.
Yeah, I think that to return to Tongues Untied, one of the brilliant things that Marlon Riggs was able to do with that platform was dismiss any notion that you had to choose between your identities or rank your identities. Even today, I hear folks sometimes asking, are you Black first, or are you gay first? But I think Marlon Riggs pretty much dispelled that by saying that you don't have to rank your identities. It's like choosing between your left eye and right eye, so they're both a part of you. And so I think that that's been a beautiful part about these sort of visual narratives, in that we're able to really see full whole people existing, and that their identities are really just a part of who we are, and they are part of what gives texture to life, essentially.
For me, I think back to your first question about what was the first kind of gay visuals that I saw. And so definitely Leroy from Fame, and as Gene Anthony Ray as Leroy of Fame, was the first in high school. But the movie that literally helped me come out was Looking for Langston by Isaac Julian. And I saw it, I was studying abroad between college, undergrad and grad school. And I saw it in London, and it just come out. And it was the first time that I really saw myself as multidimensional, where I could be a Black gay man and hit all three of those points in a way that was fully fleshed out and realized. I think there was something about the Langston Hughes poetry and the visuals and this Harlem Renaissance mixed with this kind of underground 90s dance kind of scene. And I think that's what's powerful when we can hit all those notes, right? When we don't have to be just gay or Black and gay, we can be a Black gay man and live in kind of, some Du Bois triple consciousness.
So in addition to those shows exploding on television, another thing that really took off at that time was the internet, reality television, and now we have social media. We wanted it real, we wanted it raw, we wanted it in our face, not necessarily in that order, but we loved the excitement that all of those things brought to us. Seeing people in their homes, seeing how they cut up with their friends and things of that nature. We also saw how more gay images were being seen. With a lot of these reality shows, there was always the gay best friend. What are your thoughts about the visibility of more gay images through social media, through podcasts, through the internet films and things of that nature? I'm going to go to you, Mr. Michael, to answer that question, or help me answer that question.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very excited as far as getting to see the different images that have come out of it, especially when it comes to Black gay web series. When we talk about Patrick Ian Polk and we talk about Noah's Ark, and as well, we talk about how few images that we saw at that time. The internet enabled us to be able to create these images on our own. We could get our friends together that were actors. We could, do a guerrilla crew and tell our own stories. That's important, right? We tell our own narratives. And we show that we're not all the same. So I think we have to also shout out filmmakers that were instrumental in the web series, like Christopher Street. I don't know if many people may know about these web series that came out, Finding Me, as well, that came out. So I think the internet really gave us an opportunity to take some of these ideas that we may have had as Black gay men to tell our stories. And I think having an iPhone or having an Android, unfortunately, if you have one, but having an iPhone in your hand, it gives you the ability to shoot, the stories that in the life. And as far as the images with podcasts, I think it's incredible. We've got Kid Fury as a part of the read that gives his perspective of that narrative, coming from Miami, Florida into New York. We've also got Dustin and Asante from the Friend Zone podcast that kind of tells those narratives as well. I think the internet is such a double-edged sword. We love to hate it, but it gives us an opportunity to be content creators, to create these images that we don't always see. And one of the narratives that I hear all the time, as far as when it comes to Black gay love, is that we don't see enough of Black gay love, right? So we have these images through Instagram and Facebook, and we can create this content through YouTube that pushes the needle forward and allows us that opportunity to knock down those or not knock down those doors, but we don't necessarily have to have gatekeepers, or we don't have to ask for permission. It's a quote I love so much from Ava DuVernay about how do you become a filmmaker, or how do you become anything that you want in life that you desire, you know? And she's saying that you have to stop asking for permission and just do. So with these groundbreaking web series and independent films and podcasts of just being able to hook something up in your home and tell the story that you yourself only can tell, it has kept me sane. You know, in quarantine, it has definitely kept me sane. So I think using the internet can be a very advantageous thing as far as producing Black gay content for us in films.
And Emil, you also have a podcast as well. How successful has that been for you, jumping from print media to now having almost like a radio show?
I think it's really important that we are able to harness our own power, right? And control our own narrative. And so to Michael's point, I think it's very important that we show how diverse we are as a community, and that we are not one size fits all, that we are plus size, that we are everything, right? We're light, we're dark, we're femme, we're butch, we're all these different things. And I think that's the beauty of Instagram is seeing these new voices and these young people who are just unafraid, right? To just carry on and show out in a way that we weren't. I think the other beauty of the podcast space and these web series is that we're able to have young people be able to really come out earlier and not go through a lot of pain and kind of trauma that we went through, because they can actually express themselves and work through all of that together, where we all were kind of like in isolation. You know, and I think about Charles talking about he was carrying his book, his Elin Harris book, and that's how he had identified with other people. And now they can actually have thousands of followers who are all young queer people that are gender nonconforming, and they don't give a F, and they live their lives fully. So I think having podcasts and from going from print journalism to this is more fun. This is in real time. I mean, through quarantine, look at how much great content has been created. And the fact that we can do this, you know, and we're all over the country, and here we are together having this amazing, enlightening conversation.
So guys, we've got some questions from those that are watching the show, and we're going to start incorporating that. And here's a question coming from, let's see, do I have the person's name here? Do you think sometimes reading can be a form of toxic masculinity when people are just coming for each other instead of really opening up to one another? And I'm going to give that to you, Scott.
Wow. Yes. I mean, it's not toxic masculinity as much as it's, when I came out at a young age, around older people, you were taught to, like, reading was a way to have like tough skin. So if you think about the straight community, you know, the guys say, oh, we're jawing on you, or, you know, and I felt like in the gay community, that's what reading was like. It was a way to find out if you have tough skin. And, you know, but then sometimes some people can do some mean things to hurt people's feelings. And I learned from an older person a long time ago, it was like, if you ever wanted somebody to back up off you, you read them with just a little bit of truth, so that they know to leave you alone. So I think it comes with the community. I think it's a language we speak, but I think sometimes it does get out of hand. So I think it has to be an even balance. I think it can be fun, you know, but then, you know, sometimes people use it to hurt other people's feelings. So I think there is a need to be able to talk. But then there's also sometimes when you've maybe been bullied, that's your way of knowing how to protect yourself. And that's where I talk about like being able to identify with Candy in Pose. Like, you know, she didn't take anything, and, you know, she was very, you know, quick with the tongue. And I think that's what reading does for us. I don't think it's toxic masculinity as much as it's a shield for us as a way to say, hey, don't mess with me. Or sometimes it can be in fun and just with your friends. So I think it depends on the setting that you're in. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I just think in terms of images though, it's behavior that we should check, because it became kind of the go-to way to portray a gay person or a Black gay person as the reader in art. And it is a part of how we're all designed and wired, but it is not it doesn't make up all of who we are. So a lot of times when I've auditioned to host shows, they might say, give me a little more of that Black reading sass. And let me do that organically. It's not necessarily something that I can automatically do, but once I warm up, like any good Black gay, we can get a good reading going, you know. But I just think we have to be mindful of that caricature, if you will, that shows up in art.
Yeah.
The things that make us different, those are our superpowers. Every day when you walk out that door, put on your imaginary cape and go out there and conquer the world, because the world is not as beautiful as it is if we weren't in it. That actually comes from the acceptance speech of Lena Waithe when she became the first Black and lesbian woman to win an Emmy for writing the show Master of None. Can we talk about, and I call them our sheroes, Lena Waithe, Dee Reese, and Janet Mock, how they're changing the industry and changing the narrative when it comes to lesbian women, women loving women, and things of that nature. So I'm gonna go to you, Mr. Charles. Can we talk about these amazing sheroes?
Absolutely. I think we are in this incredible moment where who gets to be a storyteller, I think that's really shifted. And I'm personally very inspired by all the women you named. And I'm just really grateful that we're in this moment. I mean, obviously there's a lot of horrific things happening around us. And I mean, many of us, even as we seek to be affirmed during Pride Month, that we're grieving and we're angry, as we should be, right, with all that's happening. But even in that, even in the rage that I feel in this world, there are women, certainly like Janet Mock, certainly like Lena Waithe, that I take this incredible inspiration from. I also want to invoke there's just been like this amazing tradition that even they stand in. So that's really incredible.
We've got a second question, and this one reads, how do you move the conversation forward with studios to include gay Black male images and not as the side act to a white cast? Let's see, who wants to, I'm trying to read your faces there to see who wants to, who can touch that one. I'm gonna go to you, Michael. What do you think about that question?
Oh, great question. I think, like I was saying earlier, I think sometimes instead of looking at these studios to fund our dreams, sometimes we have to be able to use our resources and crowdfund ourselves. Prime example, Patrick Ian Polk, The Skinny. I remember he put out a campaign to finish shooting the film because no studio would finance his film. So he put out an Indiegogo, I believe at the time, to get people to pretty much donate anything that you have. Do you have any resources? Is there anyone that you can call to help us finish making this film? But if we want to go the traditional studio route to be able to get into the room, I think it's like anything, we have to show up and we have to either have a seat at the table or we've got to be able to build our own table with it. I think it's very important for Hollywood to recognize us and give us more diverse narratives. But even as a Black gay actor that's out myself, I can let you know that sometimes going into these rooms and reading these scripts, you as an actor, you have to be able to say that I don't feel comfortable with this, or this is something that my character wouldn't do. And sometimes taking that risk, if you have that opportunity with the filmmaker or the script writer, or opportunity to access the writer's room to be able to kind of develop your character. I mean, that's kind of a long shot, but you know, at this point, for me, I feel like it's important still for us to be able to fund our own dreams of finding our own resources to tell the stories that we want to tell unfiltered, and not necessarily have to go through the studio system.
Does the culture, oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, I just want to say, I think, to piggyback off what Michael was saying, I think we also have to have a voice at the table. So that's in the decision-making, the writing about these characters. Because we have to have a voice. I think as the Black gay community, when we see these characters, we have to write the studio. I mean, we have to go back to some old ways, if that's emailing, writing, calling, but we have to make sure that the writers, the producers behind the scenes are people who look like us, who can actually relate to the character and give some type of empathy and outlook to the character. And I think that's kind of, I mean, I have to applaud Ryan Murphy for like what he's doing with Pose. Like he has trans people working behind the scenes as producers and choreographers, which actually brings some real life to the characters on screen we see, which is why we're able to relate to them. I mean, same as we talk about Noah's Ark. So I think we have to be in all positions of the industry to make sure that our voices are heard and the characters actually relate to us.
And I just,
Go ahead.
I just wanted to shout out too, like Ben Corey Jones, right? Because he's a showrunner. He worked on Insecure. He created, worked on Boomerang, and he's a Black gay man, and he's really now signing up young, not even young, just people that want to learn how to do TV screenwriting to give them a voice and a platform. So I want to shout him out because I think he's been very instrumental in making sure that we are seen in all of our forms as queer people who are diverse and who have strong stories. So I agree with everyone. I think it's like having a seat at the table or creating our own platforms.
We have another question, guys. Does the culture of being guarded impact how we navigate in the industry with one another? I see the eyes moving. Do you want me to say that again? Does the culture of being guarded impact how we navigate in the industry with one another? Charles, I'm going to go back to you. I see a.
Well, I'll try. I think that we're trained as Black gay men not to trust each other and to be on guard. And I think it's hard for us sometimes to let each other in. And as Black men, we're certainly trained to be that way as Black people, right? And I think as we get further into our identities, it gets more intense. So I do feel like maybe sometimes people put up they put up a barrier with each other, or they may not be trustful, especially in a high stakes work environment, a creative environment, and for protection. But often the things that we do to protect ourselves can also harm us. So I guess my hope is that we're able as a community to develop a community ethic around trust, around valuing each other in that way, and maybe just maybe the guards that we put up that might hinder our ability to navigate certain spaces. If I'm understanding that question correctly, maybe some of that will go away.
Patrick?
I'd love to just add to that. Charles is 100% right. I think at the same time, I want the kids to know, anybody that's listening that is considering guarded as a way of being, this from an LGBTQIA person who was once known as guarded, transparency is the answer. And transparency isn't a perfect experience in business as a Black gay man, but what I can tell you, having been around, I'm knocking on 50, I know that Black doesn't crack, but I'm here to tell you that transparency is the piece that allows us to get our narratives told, to get the stories done. It allows us to be bold enough to pitch ourselves when someone is saying they want something and the only thing that's being pitched is a white woman. And then if I pitch myself as the thing that I think is being described, I get that gig. That is like what works. And it just doesn't pay to always be guarded, even though you will get hurt, even though you will have people who don't understand. But I think you get closer to delivering the results, creatively speaking, when you just play a transparent life. Transparency has been everything to me, and trust me, I'm still hurt by it from time to time.
And just to piggyback on what Patrick just said, I think we have to help each other. No matter if someone, you help someone get a job, and no matter if they get fired the first day on the job, you still have to continue to help. That's you know, it's that thing of like, oh, I helped somebody get a job, oh, I'm gonna help the next person, but you have to continue to help. Like maybe your the first time you did it didn't work, try again. And I think that's a part of also being guarded, is that we don't trust, we don't know we can recommend people, but you have to just do it. It didn't work that time, you find the next person, and maybe you choose a better selection process of who you will recommend, but don't stop recommending people for gigs, or if you hear something happening, you know, call people up and get a referral. So that's also important.
I want to ask you guys, what are some of the ways that you have become a better person during Pride Month? Or what are some of the things that have helped you help other people become better during Pride Month? And anyone can answer that question. Anyone can jump in and answer that.
I'll jump in. I mean, I historically have not been big on Pride because I feel like it has been very exclusionary of Black people and Black bodies and our stories and our narrative. And it feels very kind of exclusionary. But I will say, since starting Native Son 4 years ago and starting to see other pockets of Black gay men really kind of being like, no, let's like the Black Pride model, like we'll do our own thing and just celebrate ourselves, has made me be more optimistic about it. And I think seeing how people like creating platforms like this that celebrate us and us telling our own stories with other Black brothers and sisters, I think that's what we have to do. So that makes me happy. And I think because of Pride, I see where, because of Native Son, I see where it touches young people who may not live in big cities, or we get a lot of DMs from people in Africa that are like so happy to see images of themselves and feel affirmed. And I think that's really important. So I look through Pride through that lens.
Anyone else want to?
I treat Pride just like America treats Black History Month. I like to just do this connection with the young gay straight alliances here in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. I speak to them year round, but I, in June, do what I can to speak to anybody that is, you know, kind of in the regard of wanting to be inspired and encouraged that it is going to get better. So I really try to do more of these during June just because it is Pride, but I do this year round. Live Out Loud is another great mentoring scholarship organization that I contribute to, specific to LGBTQIA youth, giving them opportunities when they've been abandoned by their families and are looking for a leg up in life despite that. So this is just sort of an additional excuse, Pride, for me to do this kind of talk.
This goes out to all of those Black and brown boys and girls and non-gender conforming who don't see themselves. We're trying to show you and us. That was part of the speech from Terrell Alvin McCraney, Oscar winner, filmmaker, and playwright. Let's talk about the future of Black imagery and television and Black gay imagery, I'm sorry, in television, film. You know, Terrell has been able to not only do an amazing movie, he also has the show on OWN, David Mixman, and he's been killing it on Broadway with Choir Boy. Let's talk about the future. How do you guys see the future of our images? We're at the beginning of a new decade. I know that things have not been going as we would like for them to go with COVID-19, and especially with everything that's going on around the country right now, but we've got 10 years ahead of us. So how do you see the future? And I'll start with you, Charles, if you can chime in and talk about that.
Absolutely. There are so many stories that we have left to tell, and I am excited about even some of the works that I hear are, you know, perhaps in production or being considered, like Alvin Ailey, for example. I understand that Barry Jenkins might be doing his biopic. One of the things I hope we begin to address in some of our stories is HIV stigma. I think that visual narratives in film and television and just have a powerful voice in countering narratives, if you will, that exists. And there's so much HIV stigma still in our community, and I think as in the mainstream. And I really think that the role I would like to see more filmmakers and storytellers take on is really combating HIV stigma, so that in our communities we're able to internalize those values and do a better job of how we create our own community ethics.
And what about you, Michael?
I'm excited for the future. I think especially with Terrell Alvin McCraney coming out with Choir Boy on Broadway, which was absolutely beautiful, with Jeremy Pope as well, who's a brilliant actor that's on Netflix's Hollywood. I mean, we've got plays coming out like 1 and 2, which is an incredible play, as Charles said, that is focusing on HIV stigma, of pushing the conversation, the very tough conversations that we need to have around HIV forward. Even here, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So even here in Atlanta, Georgia, there's incredible filmmakers here that are producing content about the Black trans experience. Well, pre-corona, I was working on a project that was a Black trans woman's romantic comedy, which we've never seen as well before. That very excited to do, but then COVID-19 hit. So even here in Atlanta, I mean, there's so many young minds and fresh ideas and things that we haven't seen on screen that that helps us push it forward. So I'm absolutely excited for it.
We've got Gil on with us, and so Gil, wanted to see if you had any thoughts about the future. I mean, the fact that we're doing this is amazing work, and the fact that you thought about doing this through AAFCA, talking about African American gay images, lesbian gay images in television, in media, and film, I thought was brilliant. So what can you say about the future?
I mean, I think the future is bright. When you have young actors like, Jeremy Pope, who just did an incredible job in Hollywood for Ryan Murphy, and like Emil mentioned earlier, you have talented creatives like Ben Corey Jones and others who are out there, Dee Reese, Anthony Hemingway. We have a growing crop of creatives who appear determined to share stories about Black LGBTQ, the Black LGBTQ experience. And, I can do nothing other than to applaud them, because the stories are essential. The stories matter. The stories are important. And so this program, it's been a delight, gentlemen, to have you join us tonight for this. And later on this month, we are actually going to have a conversation with Trevon Free, Anthony Hemingway, and some other creatives, as well as we're sponsoring a short film competition where we're asking young LGBT filmmakers to submit, talking about their experiences during COVID. So, but guys, I want you to share what you're doing this month for Pride, how your organizations are programming it, and also what your programming looks like during the summer. So why don't we start with you, Scott?
So with COVID, we actually have some plans coming up later this month to do a virtual town hall about just the Black experience during COVID, but as well as like what's going to be needed after this is over, and like how reskilling yourselves with education or tools, the job market, finances. So that's a town hall we have. And then we'll be showing clips or highlights from the Truth Awards. So today we launched Angelica Ross's acceptance video. She was our Culture and Arts awardee this year. So it's on our Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. So that's what we'll be doing. Showing highlights from Truth Awards, as well as doing a virtual town hall later this month.
And Emil, what about you guys at Native Son?
So Native Son, I mean, we really took this opportunity in quarantine to use it to create more content that spoke directly to our community, because we didn't see a lot. And because that's my skill set, I was able to work with Tyrus Townsend, who works with me. We really leaned in and we were doing 7 days a week programming. And it was great, but then it was kind of like overwhelming at one point. So then we kind of had to pull back 3 months in and say, okay, what's really working? And the content that was really working were conversations. We do Native Son conversations. So we've been doing those. Now we do them 5 days a week, and they're really powerful. On Friday, relative to this conversation, Cameron DePaul is going to be in conversation with Daniel Calderon about a series that he created called America Made, and it is around mental health, and it's kind of a documentary that he's now airing on IGTV. So that conversation is going to happen on Native Son on Friday. We're having a Black Gay Leadership Forum next week, similar to what Scott was talking about. How are we preparing people for when we come out of COVID, and how are we making sure that social justice, that we're ready for voting and things of that nature, that we are talking about trauma and data and all those very important things. And then some other things that are in the works that'll be more fun, because we got to have fun. And celebrate our Black joy, right? It can't all be
absolutely. Absolutely. And Charles, what can we expect from the counter narrative this month and also throughout the summer?
Absolutely. Well, there are quite a few projects that we're really excited about. One is we are launching a podcast called Black Gay Mecca, and it's about Atlanta Black LGBTQ history. We are also launching a new online publication called CNP ATL, and it's really about amplifying the stories of organizers and advocates in our community, Black folks, to provide that voice. We'll continue our ongoing work with our video broadcast, Revolutionary Health, in which Michael Ward is a host, and continue to have conversations around health and wellness in our community. And finally, we are partnering on a Zoom stage reading of the play 1 and 2, and we're really excited about that, by Dunya Love.
Wow. And Patrick, what are you up to this summer?
Well, all of my book stops pre-COVID have turned into virtual palooza. So tomorrow I'm going to be on the Derek J. Gay Like Me podcast. Friday, the Happy Hour Talk Show is doing a quarantine edition at 7 o'clock on our Facebook Live page. So please join us. You're going to catch up with the guys and everything that's going on in COVID. June 17th, hosting an NABJ webinar with the cast of Greenleaf to usher in final season. And there's some other things coming up. The LGBT Music Fest Labor Day, I say with a question mark, but I'm scheduled to host the Vanguard Awards, where we honor all of our great superstar LGBTQIA and allies. So it's going to be a busy summer, though most of it will be done from this framing right here.
And Pat, your social media tag.
I'm at patrick.riley, and the book, That's What Friends Are For, on the women who inspired me, a celebration of Black women who have been allies to us from the womb.
Sell it, man. Michael, how about you? What's your social media? How can we stay in touch?
So pretty much you can follow me, like, subscribe anywhere. I'm at Michael, Michael, the letter X, WARD, as well with my other projects that I work outside of Counter Narrative with is Black Gay Stuck at Home. So I believe the question you asked prior to is what am I doing for Pride Month? So we also do screenings as well. So on Friday, there's a screening of Tongues Untied and Looking for Langston as well. So we do these every 2 weeks. And you can find us at www.bgsah.com. @_BGSAH as well. So those are free screenings as well. Everybody is welcome, but it's primarily focused while we're here in quarantine to get those images out that we want to see. So we've done Patrick and Polk. He came for one actually with Punks that's behind me, but just creating this content as well. So follow my social media as well.
Now, are those virtual screenings or physical screenings?
We're doing it like this right here. So it's virtual screenings. We Zoom, we play the movie. There's a chat. So like, for instance, when Patrick came through, he was chatting in there. He was dropping gems. He was talking about the creation of Punks. We had Jensen Atwood come through for Noah's Ark Jumping the Broom. Nathan Hell Williams as well. Maurice Jamal. They talked about Dirty Laundry with Jennifer Lewis. Oh my gosh, she would kill me. Jennifer Lewis and Loretta Devine as well. So it's an interactive experience, and it creates a space and community for people all around the world. So we get people from, anywhere that you can think of that are excited to see us, you know, Black gay people act and just be. So it's an amazing experience.
Emil, social media, how do we get in touch?
At Emil Wilbekin on all platforms, and then at Native Son Now.
Scott, how do we stay in touch?
At Better Brothers LA on Instagram and at B Brothers LA on Twitter.
Okay. Charles, how do we get in touch? How do we stay in touch?
At The Counter Narrative on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we're at Building Desire.
Mm. And Ray, how do we stay in touch?
Through Instagram at Ray Cornelius.
And of course, you're the host of a popular show at WCLK every week.
Yeah. Yeah, so the show is Upfront inside Atlanta's entertainment industry, and we talk to the biggest names in TV, film, music, fashion, and theater, African American. I try to talk to everybody. I've had Patrick on the show, you've been on the show, and so I'd love to have you guys on the show at some point. But really love doing it. Entertainment is my passion. I love telling our stories, and I'm also working on. I submitted a a television pilot for the BET film. It was a competition that they had at the Project Create. I'm waiting to hear back to see what happened with that. We've got some other projects that we're working on, so hopefully I'll be transitioning out of media and into filmmaking. So we'll see.
Great. And thank you, Malik, and thank you, Edward, for handling the back room. On behalf of the African American Film Critics Association, you can follow us, of course, at AAFCA on Instagram and the AAFCA on Twitter, and at African American Film Critics Association on Facebook. And so on behalf of our 70+ members in the United States, the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe, we wish everybody a wonderful Pride, and we will see you soon. Tomorrow, right here, we're going to bring together a collection of financial experts to talk about financial fluency during COVID. So definitely tune in. We're going to have representatives from the DGA, the PGA, SAG, and the WGA to talk about how entertainment professionals are navigating the crisis that we're currently living in. Anyway, talk to you later. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Gil.
Thanks.